¡Prendan esa vaina! ¡Ey, préndanlo! ¡Préndanlo!
¡Ey, cuidado!
We spoke just last week to a Dutch farmer about the unrealistic emissions targets that the government has set and how they will decimate the agricultural industry in the Netherlands, which is the world's second largest agricultural exporter. But here's the thing. The reality is this is not an isolated incident. And while the ambitions of the global elites pushing radical environmental and economic agendas has grown in recent years, happily, so too has the pushback. We've seen it in growing protests over the past weeks from farmers across Europe. The overthrow of the Sri Lankan government, which, remember, wanted to turn the whole island into an organic paradise. And this, even as far back as a surprise vote, at least for the elites, in favor of Brexit and for Donald Trump in 2016. Now, this guest, I'm so excited that he's come to join us tonight. Ralph Schoelhammer is an assistant professor in economics and political science at Webster University in Vienna, and he has written a fantastic piece on the working class revolt, and he joins us now. Professor Schoelhammer, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And they do say that flattery is the highest form of intimidation, so consider me thoroughly intimidated.
Fantastic. Now, you've written this great piece in Newsweek, and one of the things that you talk about here is that there is a malaise in the West currently, and you say that ideological goals of the elites are being pursued at the expense of the lower middle class and working classes, and you see truckers in Canada rebelling against this, farmers in the Netherlands, you see people rebelling against this in the United States in different ways. You see what's happening in Germany, where they've shut off the nuclear plants for whatever reason and now are going to go into a very cold winter in just a few months. They're gratifying the elites, you write, while immiserating the working class. Tell us what is happening here. Tell us why the elites are doing this, but also what is the pushback that's happening?
I mean, I think this is a larger trend. You already mentioned, Brexit and the election of Donald Trump, and those were already symptoms of that pushback. But the situation we find ourselves in, I would say it consists of four different groups, right? One group is the activists. I mean, those are the people who really believe that the end of the world is around the corner, and they're overrepresented in media, in academia, and in the cultural sphere. Then you have the governments and politicians, and what they do is they like to virtue signal to those people because they believe, right? Most of them are on Twitter. They're very active on Twitter. They believe that they represent a huge chunk of the population. And then you have companies who want to make a profit off of it, right? For example, I don't believe that Unilever cares particularly about the environment, but it's something they have to say because they wanted to pander to a specific clientele. So you have a kind of a Bermuda Triangle of ideology that consists of those three groups. And the quote unquote, when I mean, the working class or the middle class, you could also call them the people who just pay their taxes and want to live their lives, like people who don't spend a lot of time on social media. They're trapped in this because it's more and more encroaching on their daily lives. I mean, you just mentioned it, right? In Germany, to leave nuclear energy behind was a purely political, ideological position. And the people were told, oh, don't worry, we're going to replace it with wind, we're going to replace it with solar. Now it turns out that's not going to work, and they will get poorer. And I think this is part of this. They realize now that they accepted the eccentric ideas of their elites to the extent that they did not believe that it will have a negative effect on their life. But now they see this negative effect. And this is what I tried to put together in my piece, right? It's school policy in Virginia. It is, agricultural policy in the Netherlands. It is, gas prices in France. It's nuclear energy in Germany. So these things are driven by the same thing, that the people say, wait a moment, we are supposed to be democracies when we constantly vote for governments that in the end pursue goals that are interesting to, those 5% of people who are very active, like who are very much in the public eye, but the other 95% are completely ignored. And I think this is the moment now, and I'm very curious how this is going to play out. I mean, the future would be something that you just mentioned, like a social conservative working class party, like a little bit, you guys mentioned this in the previous segment. You see this with Hispanics and working class blacks in the United States. They shift GOP because they say, wait a moment, the progressives, they are in some areas, right? They're insane. This is no longer common sense. They just want to switch to a common sense party. And I think this is exactly what we see at the moment.
Rita.
But you mentioned the people who pay their taxes and just want to live their lives and be left alone. They are always going to lose to those who want to win. People who want to be left alone are always going to lose. How can that population become more activated and become more politically aware? We've seen the farmers, because they were directly impacted. We've seen people who whose livelihoods are threatened and they rise up. But the ordinary mum and dad out in the suburbs who pays their taxes and looks upon what's happening and goes, oh, this is crazy, but doesn't really get engaged beyond that. Do you think that will shift, or is that going to remain as it has?
It depends, right? It depends also a little bit, if you allow me to say this, on individuals and people like you. I mean, what I found most surprising is, and you mentioned this also before, there is a deafening media silence on these protests, right? Maybe I wouldn't call them yet uprisings, but they're significant protests. We're talking about 30,000 people in the Netherlands. Now there are people say, no, it's not 30,000, it's 25,000. Well, that's still pretty significant. So, and this was also the pushback I got. It was, well, Ralph, you inflated the numbers. It's 29,000 and not 30,000. But you see something else happening, and that's part of the story. I mean, if you observe it in the United States, in Europe, right, all of a sudden there's all this worry, again, particularly in the political and media class, about disinformation, right? They say, oh, we need to control disinformation. We have to be careful about the information that gets out there. And this, I think, is part of this, that the best way to prevent the pushback from large numbers of people is if they don't know that anything is going on. So if you have people say, wait, we want to organize, we want to push back against it. And you had this, think about the situation about the trackers in Canada, right? When they pulled their bank accounts, when they made sure that, when GoFundMe pulled their funding efforts. So this is undermining precisely what you're saying, right? The possibility of those people to organize. So it's not a conspiracy, right? I mean, it's what interest groups, what these players do. They see there is something coming that could be a threat to their power, so they try to do something to undermine it. What bothers me is, yes, go on, please.
But Ralph, the media is never going to be on the side of anybody other than that leftist elite. And we know that. We've seen that with the truckers in Canada, with the farmers now in the Netherlands, they're being either ignored or misrepresented as extremists, as dangerous fringe dwellers. So if the media isn't going to be a vehicle for informing people about what's happening, how can you have that silent majority have their voices heard?
I mean, I'm not so sure if that is entire. I think you're right, but I think there are some good signs. I look at there is the Farmer Citizens Party in the Netherlands, right? They currently have one seat in parliament. if there would be elections tomorrow, they would get to 20 seats. The leading Dutch government party would lose 14 out of 34 seats.
Wow.
So there is something going on. So I think there is, and you guys mentioned it before, right? We had Brexit. We had Donald Trump elected. So again, what everyone thinks about Donald Trump, but it seems, I think that people have a much better grasp on what's going on. I think they sometimes have a hard time to formulate this, which is why it's then very often unfortunately happens that, kind of the most extremist parts of these movements are the ones that get most of the media attention, which is also wanted because then you can discredit the rest of these movements.
Exactly.
But I still think this is happening. And what I would always argue is I think we also have to kind of tell the people this is a much larger phenomenon. And this is, I think, particularly true in Europe, right? Europe is still riddled by significant historical guilt. And I have a feeling, so one part of the story is it's the attempt to kind of atone for a past through sacrificing the future, right? And you see this a little bit, it's this idea that if we can just go back to a more pristine world, I mean, it's very true for Germany, right? There's a certain hostility towards technology, a hostility towards innovation. So there is also a historical dimension I think we should not underestimate. I mean, I think you a couple of weeks ago had Douglas Murray on your show, and when he talks about the war in the West, I think this is part of that story, right? I don't think that these things are necessarily different from each other.
Daisy.
Look, it's interesting, the global elites, particularly the left, the doublespeak, they continually claim they're for the working class, but, of course they're not. It's very obvious they're not. But I think particularly when you consider the reaction to the truckers' protest, for instance, that we discussed, and certainly the one in the Netherlands, it has morphed into, if it wasn't already, an outright disdain and hatred for the middle and working classes, don't you think, which is quite frightening.
Yes, I think you're right. And this has always, by the way, been a problem for the left, right? The left always felt, particularly which happened in the 60s and the 70s, right? Once the left kind of was taken over, let's say, by the academic left, and it's precisely what you said, right? And they claimed that they speak for the working class. They got frustrated because it turns out that the working class people, most of them, are not interested in the Great Revolution, right? They want affordable energy, they want affordable food, they want good public schools, they want limited immigration, right? They want to maintain their cultural and national identity. So they wanted to maintain all those things that the left always told them that they shouldn't, right? You're right. They said, we speak for you because, allow me to say it a little provocatively, because apparently you're too dumb to speak for yourselves. And I think that this disdain that you described, they start to realize it. I mean, you had this before. I think that Hispanics in the United States are a perfect example for this, right? They realized, they say, wait a moment, they said they speak for us, but actually they don't. And as I think we're at the beginning, hopefully, right, of a shift there. And maybe just as a concluding remark on this is important because we are hampering ourselves also geopolitically. I mean, it is absurd. China builds, the Belt and Road Initiative, and the G7 want to do something similar. And the first thing they say they're going to do is take care of climate and gender equality. Interesting topic. But this is not how you play the geopolitical game. And we saw it, I'm sure, James, that you will talk about this a little later today. I mean, the visit of Biden in Saudi Arabia showed it. I mean, they treated him, they ridiculed him basically, right? I mean, they sent him packing without anything concrete. And this is, yeah, go on, sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, but it's really interesting. You talk about the geopolitics because you look at where this same elite mindset has led to geopolitically. What have we gotten? Well, we've gotten the Arab Spring, which was supposed to be about democracy, and you wind up with the Wagner Group running half of the Middle East, and Libya turning into a slave market. You look at the way the rest of the world, which doesn't share Western liberal values, looks at the values that are trying to be exported to them by the West, and they say no. And now you look at the conflict in Ukraine, where the opposition leader here in Australia was just on this network before saying this is going to be a long war, which of course will drive up energy prices even more. How does the elite still get to even be referred to as an elite when they keep making so many wrong calls?
Well, I think the reason is because they still are on the levels of power, right? I mean, I think a few days ago, there was I know this is a small thing, but I think it's part of the story. A dance school in New York that, they ban now ballet because ballet is white and privileged. So we are in
and the Russians like ballet too.
Yeah, no, but that's there. We're in constant war against ourselves. And I think this has created something, I'm in Vienna, so I can allow my inner Sigmund Freud to speak, so to say. It's a neurosis where you have a situation, because you mentioned Ukraine, people that would never ever put an Australian or Austrian or American flag in any of their social media profile, right? They now have Ukrainian flags in there. And this is again one of these things, right? So it's like it's almost as if you can be nationalistic for Ukraine, but you can never ever dare to be nationalistic for your own country. And I think this is something that people start to feel more and more, right? They say, why is it right? Why can't I be a patriot, right? Why can't I be a nationalist? Why and we can quibble about these terms, but the point is, why do I constantly feel that I have to sacrifice things that are very important to me in my daily life for some higher cause that probably never comes to fruition anyways? I mean, let's be completely honest here. We talk about countries that have a hard time controlling migration, that have a hard time controlling inflation, like all what we would say that talk about crime. Look at Great Britain. They have serious crime problems. So all of these things they cannot address. But changing the world's climate, right? Controlling the very that they can do.
That they can
Controlling the weather.
Professor Schulhauer, we're going to have to leave it there. We're out of time. But thank you so much for joining us here on the show today. It's been an absolute pleasure and an education. We will definitely have you back. So we look forward to having you back on Outsiders again.
Shalom. I want to start off by saying Kal Halal Yamla, Yahweh, Ba'Shem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'Shem Rekah Kodesh. Double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone for teaching us the truth and who rule well. Peace and citations unto the Akim that is spread around the four corners of the earth, spreading his word in sincerity and in truth. Shalom to the hopeful elect. I'm the brother Quatazab Zion, coming back through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shem Yahweh Shai with another lesson, with another video, and Lord willing, this video is edifying. Gone. So in this video, I want to speak on the news video that you just saw, which goes into a deafening media silence is being heard. You know, it's a deafening media silence, meaning that the media is keeping certain things silent. The real issues that are at hand, the media is covering up. Why? Because they are under the command of the elite. You know, the 13 banking families. You know, the richest, the 1%, the 1% rich people upon the earth. You know, they are controlling and pulling the strings of the media. So there's a deafening media silence about the protests. You know, the Dutch protests, the protests in Sri Lanka, in Panama, you also have protests. Canada, the truckers were protesting. In Germany, the nuclear plants are going to shut down, you know. But what are they giving us? They are giving us distractions, you know. Going to a G7 summit, and what is the result of the G7 summit when all the important countries have their summit, their meeting? They come up with climate change and gender equality. Those are the issues at hand. Those are the distractions that they come with, but they don't talk about the protests. Let's go to the word protest. Protest. Let's go. Let's go down. Shalakia. Bear with me for a second. Protest, the act of protesting a public manifestation of dissent. That's what they're doing right now. You know, a public manifestation, an organized manifestation. But what it really goes into is, let's see, this, to rebel. To rebel, rise up. Arise, take part in a rebellion, renounce a former alliance, allegiance, Shalakia. You see? So these people, they are rebelling against the government. They are rising up against the government. Let's go into that word rebel, let's see. Shalakia for the commercial. Rebel, to refuse allegiance to and oppose by force an established government or ruling authority. You see, so they're refusing the established government right now in a bunch of countries, because for example, the Dutch, they come with a emission policy that these farmers, they can't never keep up with. You see, so the government came up with that emission policy. So these farmers that have to conform themselves to this policy, they are rebelling against the established government, man. To resist or defy an authority or a generally accepted convention, to feel or express strong unwillingness or repugnance. You see, one who rebels or is in rebellion. So that's what these people are doing, man. They're rebelling against their own government. You see, they're rising up against their own government. So let's go to the scriptures. Let's go to the book of 2nd Ezra 9, verse 3. Therefore, when there shall be seen earthquakes and uproars of the people in the world, then shalt thou well understand that the Most High spake of those things from the days that were before thee, even from the beginning. You see? So when you see these things, earthquakes and uproars of the people, and that's what you're seeing right now, it was 2 years ago also in 2020 that you had uproars of the people, but now again. So you see, these prophecies, they're coming to pass. If you missed it the first time, this second time, well, yeah, that's why this video is also being made, because they're silencing these things. So now they're covering it up, try to cover it up, try to silence it. But we as watchmen, we as newsmen, as news anchors from Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, we bring it out, so that we put it in the forefront. You see? Let's go to 2nd Ezra 15, verse 16, and it reads, For there shall be sedition among men, and invading one another. They shall not regard their kings nor princes, and the course of their actions shall stand in their power. So there shall be sedition among men. Let's go into that word sedition. Sedition. And it reads, conduct or language inciting rebellion against the authority of a state. See, that's the same thing that we just read about, the protest. The protest goes into rebelling and arising and rising against the government, against the state. Insurrection, rebellion. Let's see, what more do we got? Insurgency, insurrection. Let me see. I believe the scripture also says something about insurrection. No, Salakia. No, that's something else. 2nd Ezra 16, verse 70. For there shall be in every place and in the next city a great insurrection upon those that fear Yahweh Hashem Yahushai. So ultimately, when all these things have come to pass, when the prophecies have come to pass, then everybody's eyes is going to be focused upon the men that fear Yahweh Hashem Yahushai. So they're going to be focused on the servants of the Most High, and they're going to go after these men. So that's that insurrection of the men that fear Yahweh Hashem Yahushai. But going back, 2nd Ezra 15 and 16, for there shall be a sedition among men, meaning a violent uprising against the government, and invading one another. So it's going to be that bad, just like how now the farmers are boycotting the distribution centers, that are blocking the roads and stuff like that. So that's making an artificial famine and all these forest fires also, they're ruining crops and the heat and all those things, are also making for it to be a bad year for crops, you see. So there's going to come a time of famine, and people are going to evade one another. They shall not regard their kings nor princes, meaning they're not going to listen to the rulers, to the government, the established government. That's the kings and the princes. And the course of their actions shall stand in their power. So they're going to do whatever the hell they want, these people. People are going to go buck wild. That's why the scripture says in the book of Matthew 24, verse 12, and because iniquity shall abound, iniquity is sin upon sin, the love of many shall wax cold. People are going to be cold-hearted in those times. They're not going to regard their neighbors or, loved ones or people that are close to them. No, you're going to think about you and your own. You have to survive, and you and your household, you see. But all these things, Matthew, jumping to verse 8, all these things are the beginning of sorrows. You see, so now we're in the beginning stages. So it's going to get way worse than what it is right now. The love of many is going to wax cold. That's why the Most High also said he's going to put the Egyptian against the Egyptian. Salakia. This is Isaiah 19, verse 2. And I will set the Egyptian against the Egyptian, meaning the modern day Egyptians. Who are those? Those are the Edomites, the modern day people that are in rule, in rulership. Those are the so-called white people. So those people are going to battle one another. Like it also says in Matthew 24, nation shall rise up against nation, but also within the nation, they are going to fight amongst each other. And they shall fight every one against his brother, and every one against his neighbor, city against city, and kingdom against kingdom, you see? So it's going to be bad out here, man. You see? But all these things have to come to pass so that there can be peace, ultimately. So all the fires are being started. Everything is being blown, but the media is keeping it silent. But all these things, like you just saw in the clips, all these protests, all these raging people, that's what's going on right now. The tensions are building up, you see? And even with these forest fires, it's also Yahweh Bashem Yahushai that is within these forest fires doing the damage. Isaiah 29 and 6 speaks about that. Just like we read in 2nd Ezra 9, the Most High is going to start visiting the world which he made. This is Isaiah 29 and 6. It says, thou shalt be visited of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, power of hosts, with thunder and with earthquake and great noise, with storm and tempest and the flame of devouring fire. You see? And those are those forest fires right now, man. You see? The Most High is within those devouring fires, doing damage. Because this earth, like we know it, has to pass away for the kingdom of heaven to come. This side has to be destroyed. You see? And even if it's not a natural disaster, because personally, you see, these fires, the heat wave, this is BBC, heat wave wildfire spread across Europe from July 18, 2022. Wildfires are burning across Europe, fueled by the hot conditions. In western France, thousands have fled their homes as firefighters tackle spreading blazes. In Spain, at least 20 fires are burning out of control. Meanwhile, thousands of acres of lands, or hectares of land have also been burnt in Greece and Portugal in recent days. Our correspondents across the region have been describing the situation on the ground. You see, so I'm gonna put this in the description box so you can read all about it. It's painful to see the countryside burn. See, so it's the Most High that is within this devouring fire, because he would visit the earth with plagues, man. You know, he's had enough of this place. It's time for it to go down, you see. And even if it would be this, because if you, let's go to, it can also be what was it again? Yeah, this directed energy weapon. Let me see if I can get a better picture. Directed this is a better picture. The US Navy and the future of directed energy weapons. You see that? That's a laser. That's a laser blast. You see? Focused energy. So they have these technologies, they have these weapons. And it could be something like this. You see, a blast from miles or kilometers in the sky straight down to the forest. If they can, with military precision, hit targets with such a directed energy weapon, what is a forest, man? A forest is a wide space, a wide empty space. So they could just use this to start a fire. You see? A directed energy weapon. So if it also is this, you know, that the so-called white man uses that, still, it's Yahweh Bashem Yahushai that put it in his mind to do that. You see? Proverbs 21, verse 1. The king's heart is in the hand of the Most High. As the rivers of water, he turneth it whithersoever he will. So the king, which is the ruling power, which is Esau, you know, the wicked, the king's heart is in the hand of the Most High. So the Most High, he steers this man. If he wants him to do wicked, just like he did with the Sorn, that he opened up a portal and all these things started to happen also. You know, you have also the Georgia Guidestones, lightning hit it, and then they cleared it up the next day. You know, so-called somebody dropped a bomb there or put an explosion, made it explode, but then the next day they cleared it. You know, where's the evidence? How are you going to start a case? You know, so that's weird. But these things have to come to pass, and it is the Most High that's putting it in this devil, his mind, in this wicked man, his mind, so that he can turn up, so that he can bring the fire, as it says in Revelations 12 and 12. You know, the devil has he knows that he has but a short time, so he's going to come with great wrath. You know, so he's turning up, so the Most High can also turn up. You know. So yeah, man. I hope this video is edifying. And I want to say, Kal Halal Yamla, Yahweh, Basham, Yahushai, Basham Rekakodash, Shalom Akim.